gold. The opening scene shows a train moving through a desert. Sitting inside the train is a rough-looking man named Virgil, a woman and her baby. A little while later, the train stops and Virgil gets out. After getting down from the train, Virgil walks to an outpost where he finds the attendant watching TV. Virgil talks to the attendant about meeting someone who was supposed to take him to the compound. However, the attendant watching TV ignores him. Virgil then asks for the bathroom. The attendant watching TV answers him in a foreign language, pointing in the direction of the bathroom. On getting to the dirty, flies-infested bathroom, Virgil eases himself. While easing himself, a manly voice asks from outside if he is the one going to the compound. Virgil answers, yes. The next scene shows Virgil washing his head when he is challenged by another man not to waste any drop of water as it was hard to get. Moments later, Virgil is seen traveling in a vehicle with the driver, Keith, who explains his fee for the journey. Still on the road, Virgil listens to the news from the truck's radio. While on the road, the truck's tire gets busted. The duo gets down and works to get the tire fixed. As they're at it, they spot two wild dogs fighting. The driver goes over, terminates the injured dog and chases the other dog away. After fixing the tire, they get back on the road. The next scene shows Virgil and Keith taking a break to refuel their vehicle and rest since it's night already. The driver asks Virgil if he's from the West and Virgil affirms that he is. He adds that things are way worse over there now. The driver then asks Virgil why he chooses to go to the compound. Virgil says he is going there for a lifetime opportunity. The driver tries to convince Virgil that there's no better life out there at the compound. Keith adds that all Virgil will find there is just hard labor. However, Virgil tells Keith that he is not afraid of hard labor. The next morning, Virgil and Keith get back on the road. Virgil is seen driving while Keith rests. Virgil increases the car AC and this leads to the car's engine running down. The driver gets angry at Virgil, telling him he warned him not to turn the AC all the way up. Virgil apologizes to Keith and Keith tells him that it's probably just the hose that needs fixing. Moments later, Virgil goes to ease himself when he spots some cluster of stone and goes to investigate. Getting there, he finds out a nugget of gold is among the stones. Virgil calls Keith to come over and check it out. Keith gets there and brings out a firelighter. He says if he burns it and it turns black that it isn't gold. After burning it, Keith confirms it is gold. Shortly afterward, the duo is seen digging to get the gold out but they discover it is bigger than they thought. The duo attach the truck to the gold with a rope to pull it out but the gold wouldn't move and the rope cuts. They try it again but the same thing happened. Keith, frustrated, starts digging with the shovel again. Shortly after Virgil joins him. By nightfall, the duo can be seen digging out the gold all to no avail. Keith leaves to get firewood to make a fire to scare away the wild dogs when it gets dark and Virgil joins him. Sitting around the fire, Virgil and Keith discuss how their life is about to change. Keith stands up jumping excitedly screaming, "We just found a pile of gold." Later that night, Keith tells Virgil that one of them would have to go to the east to get the excavator while the other stays behind and protects the gold. Keith suggests Virgil should go, but Virgil argues that Keith knows exactly where the excavator is and should be the one to go. Keith explains to Virgil that since he is not from around the area, Virgil might not have what it takes to survive in the desert while he's gone. Virgil insists he will stay with gold. Then, Keith adds the journey will take 5 days. The next morning, the duo divides their water. Keith gives Virgil a blade for protection and a SAT phone for communication. Shortly after, Keith leaves. Virgil makes a shed to protect himself from the sun. He then tested the phone to see if it was working. Later that day, Virgil goes to get firewood. On getting back, he sees a scorpion and chases it away. While sitting beside the fire in the night, Virgil has dinner. Sometime later that night, he can hear the sound of some animals and he gets scared. The next morning, Virgil wakes up very tired. He goes to ease himself. He wastes about using some of his water to clean himself when he remembers he only has a little quantity. Just then, the SAT phone rings. Virgil runs over but before he could get there, the ring stops. He goes to get firewood. As he gets back, Virgil notices a little change around the gold area. Later that day, Virgil walks around the desert and finds a crashed plane. Virgil decides to rest inside the crashed plane. Sometime later, he pulls off parts of the plane and drags it to the gold site and uses it as a shelter for the night. He sleeps off shortly that evening. Later that day, Virgil wakes up tired with his skin burned from the effect of the sun's heat. He goes over to the gold and speaks to himself there. While sitting, Virgil gets an idea that he could actually break off a chunk of the gold. Moments later he is seen trying to break some of the gold. He is successful in doing so. Just then, the SAT phone rings. Keith informed Virgil that he is going to stay longer than expected because the truck's engine overheated. Virgil tells Keith he got a chunk of the gold, but Keith tells him to stay with the gold and he will be back as soon as he can. Later that night, wild animals surround Virgil, but he scares them away with some of the firewood. The following morning, Virgil drinks water when he spots a snake around him. He tries to kill the snake, but it escapes. Turning back, Virgil discovers he has poured away most of his water while trying to kill the snake, leaving him with just a little quantity. The next day, Virgil is at the plane crash site when he sees a woman coming towards him. He hides inside the plane with his chunk of gold. The woman comes and tells him to come out of his hiding place. The woman offers him food, but he refuses. She then questions Virgil's motives and asks if he's there alone. She asks Virgil where he's taking the parts of the plane he's gathering, but Virgil ignores her. Moments later, she stands up and goes toward the gold site, but Virgil chases after her and tells her he could have the plane all to herself. She follows Virgil as she questions him on how he ended up in the desert. Virgil gets angry and tells her to leave him alone. Just then, Virgil feels a headache. The woman tells him to take his time and rest. As Virgil rests, the woman starts walking towards the gold site, but Virgil follows her, screaming at her. On getting to the gold site, the woman concludes Virgil is hiding something. Just then, Virgil hits her in the head with an object, knocking her out. Moments later, Virgil buries her after taking everything he needs from her. Shortly afterward, the wild dogs dig open the shallow grave. Virgil chases the dogs away and drags the body to a distant location where he burns it as he cries. The ring of the SAT phone wakes Virgil the following morning. Keith informs Virgil that he's gotten the excavator and he's coming, but the excavator is slowing him down. Keith tells Virgil it might take longer than planned before he gets to the gold site, but he encourages Virgil to stay strong. Just then, Virgil asks when Keith is going to fix the hose, but Keith reminds Virgil that he already did that before leaving. Virgil notices he's already hallucinating due to his lack of water. Just then, he sees a vehicle passing by. Later that day, Virgil is out gathering firewood when he sees a sandstorm. He runs to his shelter to take cover. Inside the shelter, the storm rips away Virgil's shelter. Shortly afterward, he gets knocked out by the branch of a tree. Virgil wakes up in a pile of sand with a stick stuck in his stomach. While in pain, he slowly walks to where his shelter was to check if his chunk of gold is still there. He finds the gold there, but discovers all his resources, including food and water, are gone. Crawling on the ground due to pain, he goes to the gold site to check if it's still there. On getting to the gold site, he faints. The next scene shows Virgil removing the stick in his stomach as he bleeds profusely. Virgil then makes a fire and heats a can in it. He cries as he burns the wound whole with the hot can. He then mixes the liquid coming from his body with sand and paints his face with it. Shortly afterward, Virgil opens his eyes to see a woman pointing a crossbow at his head. Moments later, the woman gives him water. Virgil lies on the floor as he hallucinates. Sometimes pass yet again and Virgil gets a call from Keith. He looked around and didn't see the woman. He concludes it was a hallucination as he talks to Keith on the phone. Just after the phone call, the woman comes over and asks him if he is hungry. The woman looks exactly like the woman he terminated. She offers Virgil help, but he screams at her to go away. Just then, the woman asks if Virgil saw her sister around, but he gives her no answer. She leaves. Afterward, Virgil wakes up and sees himself surrounded by burnout fires and wild dogs. Virgil calls Keith asking where he was, and Keith tells him that he is close. Virgil tells Keith he needs to hurry as the dogs try to attack him. Just then, Keith is seen in a distance sitting down and looking at Virgil with a telescope as the dogs attack him and drag him away. Virgil is being consumed by the dogs as he looks on to the gold. Moments later, Keith comes with the excavator and looks down on Virgil's body. He goes to the truck to pick something up. As he turns back, he is shot with an arrow in the chest. He falls down trying to figure out who shot him. Can it be the woman's sister who shot him or not? We are left to answer that question in our heads as the